we have some Dan Wootton coverage from Byline Times to catch up on. And we're actually going to dive into the July 28th investigation from Byline Times by starting in the middle. This seems like such a long time ago, but just earlier the previous month, The Sun had been reporting heavily on the BBC scandal involving Hugh Edwards. And they were criticized for it. Here was a response from The Sun in a comment piece from July 13th. Quote, "A desperate couple approached us with firm evidence that he was paying large sums to a young person with a spiraling drug addiction." Continuing on, "But police said nothing could be done, and despite a detailed complaint to the BBC, it did nothing either. What do our critics, especially Mr. Edwards' pious media friends, think we should have done? Told the family to shove off? Turned a blind eye to what appeared to be a clear abuse of power by a household name? Ree-hee-hee-heely." Y'all, there is nothing like biting into the sweet, sweet taste of hypocrisy after your morning coffee. So just remember that, because all of that could be said to The Sun and the Mail on their lack of coverage and even care about the several alleged instances of Dan Wootton acting inappropriately and in some cases illegally. The point of this piece is that the Mail and the Sun knew about serious crimes about Dan Wootton before the investigation came out and decided to do nothing about it. And at least in the case of the Sun, they told one ex-porn star who said that Dan had him do illegal things like filming people without their consent, using other people's Facebook profiles to target individuals. When he went to the Sun, they said, "We can't do anything about it, go to the police." Basically, pass the buck. They quote a professor out of Leeds about this situation, especially the moral high ground that the Sun in particular attacked the BBC for having, yet the hypocrisy with not covering Hugh Edwards, and then how they have basically done the exact same thing, but also Dan Wootton himself. Here's what the professor says. Quote, "Dan Wootton has set himself as a moral arbiter whose job it is to condemn others for moral flaws, and that means that his own moral flaws are a matter of public interest," end quote. He goes on to point out that Dan has had no problem exposing other people in media for affairs, whether they were illegal or not. Plus the number of entertainers that he has outed. Because, and I don't think this can be stressed enough, Dan needs to be held accountable for these allegations. But this is also someone that needs serious help. I am not being funny about that. He needs help. But here's the part that I am particularly interested in, and it is the IPSO. The IPSO is the Independent Press Standards Organization. The IPSO was set up to replace the Press Complaints Commission. This was back in 2014. The PCC was set up in the wake of Princess Diana's death to basically avoid any draconian laws that could impede their journalism or something. And to be clear, I am very pro-journalism and uncovering information the public needs to know to make informed decisions about their government, about their leaders, about the monarchy. But that's not really happening. That check on power, not really happening. The PCC was voluntary. Its representatives made up major publishers. And you're going to be shocked to hear this. They really didn't do a good job during the phone hacking scandal with News of the World and the subsequent Levinson inquiries. And because I cannot say this enough, Guy Black was the head of the PCC, and his longtime partner is Mark Boland. And they were together during the period where Mark Boland was a spin doctor for Charles and Camilla to improve their dreadful polling numbers and reputations. I don't give a damn about my bad reputation, except I want to be queen, so maybe I do. Anyway. It cannot be overstated how useless and corrupt the PCC was. And there have been similar complaints about the IPSO that was set up in its wake. I haven't dug enough into the IPSO, but even just looking at their appointees, their board, it's made up of some of the same people that work for these tabloids, like literally an editor for The Sun. And I'm not saying it can't be helpful and useful to have people in the know that worked in these environments serving on the board to regulate, but it's something to dig into for sure. Because this Dan Wootton case is certainly a test for the IPSO. And the Byline Times piece brings this up. They say that there is a clear ethical failing that IPSO, the press complaints handler, should investigate given that its claims to uphold high editorial standards. And the article is alleging with evidence that they have that I'm sure they have turned over to the appropriate people, that the Sun and the Daily Mail knew this was coming down the pipeline. And they decided to do absolutely nothing. And in fact, while they were doing nothing, they were directing attention on this BBC scandal. And there is now yet another individual, another man that says he was paid to do things for Dan Wootton. Like Trump's indictments, I have lost count at this point. But it feels like a lot of things are coming to a head that the 2012 Levinson inquiry tried to suggest fixes for legally, that David Cameron was like, nah, boo, we good. And also this IPSO that was set up as a response to the ineffectiveness of the PCC. All very interesting. More to come.